Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing that screen.
All right, cool. So welcome everybody to the Tech Talk. Got Nick here. Rachel will tell you a little bit more about Nick in a second. One thing I want to note is, and you might have seen it on the slide, there are live captions. If that's helpful to you, you can just hit the Zoom's closed caption button down there and enable captioning. And the captions will be available on the YouTube recording later as well. So yeah, so you'll have captions either now or later. I do want to just say this talk is sponsored by the Collab Lab, and the Collab Lab is yep, little shimmy, a little shake about the Collab Lab, because the Collab Lab is a US-based nonprofit that helps early career developers get jobs, especially people in underrepresented groups. And the way that we do that is by providing collaborative project practice where developers work on teams together, build things, and learn how software teams work. So it's a skill that's kind of hard to get if you're studying on your own, or even most boot camps don't really go into a whole lot of depth with this stuff. So you pair program, you do code reviews, you demo, and you do retros, all the kind of activities that a professional software team would do. And at the end, people feel more confident going into interviews and that kind of thing. So that's our kind of main gig. But with that, enough about Collab Lab. Pass it over to Rachel to introduce our speaker for the night.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fishoff, she, they pronouns. I'm a volunteer at the Collab Lab, but I've also been a participant in the regular project, the advanced project, and now I'm part of the pilot career lab. So I feel excited about that. I'm going to introduce Nick Taylor. Nick Taylor, he, him pronouns, the lead software engineer with a focus up front end at Forum, the software that powers dev. He's a big fan of TypeScript, JavaScript, React, and Node. He enjoys live coding, which he does every second Wednesday on the dev Twitch stream. And aside from programming, he enjoys contributing to open source, hitting the gym, snowboarding, and for a long, long time ago, rugby. And just to know, he does not like spiders.
I guess we can get started then. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna share my screen here. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you see the slide?
See Storybook.
Just asking the obvious stuff before it doesn't get awkward and I'm 10 slides in and people are like, yeah, he doesn't know. All right, cool. All right, so let's get started. Yeah, so like Rachel was saying, I'll just say a little more bit about me. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I'm at Nikki T online pretty much everywhere on the internet. You can check my website out at imdeveloper.com. And like Rachel was saying, I do live coding as well. We typically pair on the dev Twitch stream with folks from the community on forum issues. But I also stream on my own Twitch as well, where I do either just work or pair programming with stuff that's not necessarily forum related stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm hoping my voice will last the entire time because I was on a 2.5-hour stream earlier today. So if you see me guzzling down water, that's why. Okay, so let's get to it. So we're talking about Storybook today, and we'll also be doing some live coding. And I encourage anybody in the virtual crowd, if they want to jump in on the pairing, we can do that. If not, I'm totally fine just going by myself. But either way, you're welcome to chime in. Don't be shy. And basically, at the end of the talk, you should be able to install Storybook on your own project and start making stories. There's a lot of things in Storybook. I'm going to cover a bunch of them, but I'm going to have a section of resources at the end of the slide deck, which you can check out because there's just a ton of stuff, and I honestly can't cover it all in the time allotted. So I encourage you to check out those things at the end. So what we're going to cover is we're going to do some Storybook history. We're going to talk about what is Storybook, and we're going to check out some examples of Storybook. We're going to define what a storybook story is. We're going to go about writing our first storybook story. We're going to talk about Decorators, which is a feature in Storybook. We're going to talk about the component story format, which is was considered by the Storybook team the best practices for writing stories. We'll also touch briefly on doing documentation with MDX, which is Markdown with JSX in it. That's something that's a little newer. I think that project is a couple of years old. I think it got popularized in Gatsby. Might have been other projects too, but also we're going to cover customizing Storybook. We're going to talk about configuring the Storybook server. It's we're going to look at add-ons, which are extensibility points of Storybook. I'm also going to touch briefly on customizing Webpack. This is something you don't need to do, but in the forum code base, we've had to do that. We don't use React. It's primarily a Rails application. And in our case, we're not using React in the front end. We're using Preact, which is a lighter version of React. And there's some things you need to do to make that compatible with certain things. And you can do that all in Webpack. And then we're going to also just talk about configuring Storybook rendering. And hopefully we have time at the end. I got a few projects from Andrew from the Collab Lab, and we're going to jump into the TCL 16 project and get Storybook installed and see if we can start writing some stories. And from there, we'll wrap things up. Okay, so let's go with a little bit of Storybook history here. I actually started
Nick,
using
I don't know
Storybook.
if you have other slides showing, but we're still seeing what we'll cover. Is that what we should be seeing?
No, it isn't. And I'm glad you didn't make that awkward and you said it right away. I think that Zoom.
Yeah, it's like
so
optimize for video,
yeah,
maybe.
Optimize for video. Yeah. So when you share something, it just seems to have started happening to everybody lately.
Okay, so how do I change that?
Good question.
Well, you have to stop
I think
sharing,
you
and then
stop share.
when you go to share again,
Okay.
you ought to be able to to do that.
Okay, is it in advanced or? Because
so it's a little checkbox down at the bottom of the sharing dialog.
Okay. Oh yeah, I see it. So optimize for video clip. Is that what it is?
Yes.
So make sure that is checked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. That's the first time that happens to me. So thank you.
It just started happening to like everybody in the last like week, I feel like. So you're not alone, Nick.
Broccoli in my teeth. She'll be the first to tell me. So, cool. Can you see them moving now?
Is anybody else getting that weird audio feedback?
Yeah.
Okay, now I don't hear it.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Let me go back to sharing again. I don't know what's going on. All right, cool. Let's do it again. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I don't know what was up with that. Okay, and let's just make sure that the slides are changing. Can you see the slide that says some Storybook history?
Yes.
All right, and I'm just going to move forward real quick. Can you see it changing?
Yes, it's changing. It still says some Storybook history.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So, all right, just chime in if it's not doing it, switching slides. But that's good to know because I'm going to have to do that when I share screens tomorrow in the Zoom. Yeah, so just some Storybook history. This project, I think it started in 2016. There's a framework called Meteor from, it's still around. It's actually the company that created Apollo GraphQL and all that stuff. But back in the day, it was like this universal JavaScript framework where you could write server side and front end code and share it. And it's kind of like, it's one of the earlier, bigger frameworks for Node.js. But there was a person there in the open source community called Arunoda Susaripala, and he created Storybook as part of his startup called Cryptera. And the project was and still is open source. Eventually his startup closed up shop and Aranura moved on to work at Vercel, which used to be Zeit, and now he's on his own startup again. But some new folks came in from the community and took over the project and kind of breathed new life into it. All that rambling on to just say that a lot has changed in Storybook over the past 5 years, and version 6 introduces a lot of new changes. Version 6 came out, I think, a couple months ago. And so there's a lot of new changes in there. And since we're doing an introduction to Storybook, I'm not going to go into like migrating from a version 5 and so on, or talking about the old syntax of writing stories, because I don't think it makes sense. Yeah. And then since we're doing an introduction to Storybook, we'll focus, yeah, like I said, we'll focus on how we're doing things in version 6. Are my slides still changing? I'm paranoid now.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're looking at some Storybook history with a bunch of icons.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so Storybook was originally built for React only, but over the past 5 years, it supports other frameworks like Vue, Angular, Ember, Svelte, pretty much all the big names, I guess you would say, in framework land in JavaScript. So what is Storybook exactly? Think of it like a workbench for building out components that your application consumes without the burden of running your application. This might not seem like a big deal if you're working on a side project that might not be very large, but I can give you the example of Forum. Forum is like a super large code base that runs Ruby on Rails. There's all kinds of moving parts. And if I'm building front-end Preact components, I don't need any of that. So it's like a huge burden that I can remove just by working in Storybook. So that's kind of the goal of what it does. And also by building out your components in Storybook, you're building them in isolation. It forces you in a good way to really think about how you're building your component. So building things in Storybook will potentially and hopefully help you avoid tightly coupling things together. So for example, a React component will receive props, but if you were working directly in the application, maybe you access something that's globally available right within your component. And that's what I mean by it being tightly coupled. So if you were to build this in Storybook, you wouldn't have all these global things available to you. So it really makes you think about, how am I going to build this component? The other thing too is like, if we go with the example that we have here, this is it's a mention autocomplete feature that we're working on currently. And it uses Elasticsearch for populating the data. Elasticsearch is just a search engine that indexes data. But in the context of building this component, like we don't want to be running an Elasticsearch server. We just really want to say, when I'm building this component, it receives a prop of like some function to say, go fetch users, for example. So what you can do when you're in the context of Storybook is, since it's coming in as a prop, you can set the prop to whatever you want. So we can actually just have that function return a dummy list of users, for example, just so we can showcase it and build it within Storybook. And it's things like that you'll notice as you start working in Storybook. It'll start making you think more like that, and I think that's a good thing. Other things could be like, actually a perfect example of this is we're tearing out Elasticsearch at Forum and we're using it something else. So if this was tightly coupled to Elasticsearch, it would mean we would have to rework the component. So by having it coming in as a prop, just saying, send me a list of users, it simplifies things, and it also doesn't mean we're tightly bound to Elasticsearch. There's other things you can do to test this. Like if we really wanted to test it with the real stuff, you would probably want to do an end-to-end test. There's popular testing framework for end-to-end testing called Cypress. I think Becca Harrett-Weigel did a Collab Lab talk about that recently. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out too. That's just kind of more testing it in the real scenario. the other thing is it's living interactive documentation for your entire team that's working in the front end, which is kind of nice. You know, you can be testing these components and seeing them in different states. Depending on how you write the documentation, you can have code snippets you can copy out and stuff. Think of it kind of like a one-stop shop where you can really see how things work, grab some code snippets, paste it in, and just get to work right away. So it's pretty handy for that too as well. Some examples of Storybook. You can see there's some at there's a bunch of them. It's linked in the resources, but if we look at a few of them, if I open this one here, do you see the web browser tab open with the Storybook?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is the Guardian website Storybook. So the Guardian is a newspaper in the UK. And so you can see, this is I'm just showing this quickly to show you that there's a lot of folks that have been using this. And you can see in some cases, they've got bigger components, smaller components, and some of these are interactive. I'll go to a different example here. If we come back, we go to like Airbnb, they have a whole dates thing, and you can see it's interactive. You can click on it. There's some other cool stuff in here, like they have different locales. So you can see this is in, I believe, Chinese. I'm not positive. So this is another way of like, they're probably passing in a prop to say the locale is, I don't know what the locale is for China, but it's probably like CH dash something. But it's just kind of neat that you're seeing this actual component functioning, but not within the application. And again, it's just to stress the fact that building it in this kind of workbench scenario, you're really able to encapsulate how the whole component works. Yeah, okay, so let's keep moving along here. So what is a storybook story exactly? It's essentially a view of a component in a certain state. And you can have for a component multiple stories. So for example, a button's always a good example. Buttons have variants. So you could have a primary button, you could have a secondary button, you could have a destructive or danger variant button. And so each of these views could be different stories where you're just showing it what it looks like. So in the case of a danger button, it's red, for example. If we moving on. And yeah, like I mentioned, the components showcased in Storybook, they can be stateless, meaning they're just props, but they can also contain component state too. And you kind of saw that, well, in this animated GIF here, you can see it happening too. There's some props being passed in, like the list of users, and then when you select one, it's keeping that state, and then it's updating something. So it's not just for components that have props. It can be even for components that have internal state as well. Okay, so let's talk about writing your first Storybook story. I'm gonna go with the example of making a button just because I think everybody's pretty familiar with buttons, and it's a good way to kind of showcase this. So we need to think about like what kind of props would a button have. So for example, it needs button text, perhaps a variant like primary or secondary, a size, small, large, medium, an on-click most likely. And that's kind of a good start. And I just mentioned this might seem obvious, but it's always good to, before you even code, think about like what you're going to be building. So, whether that's if you're somebody that jots things down on paper or like, uses, Apple Notes or Notepad or whatever all the cool kids are using these days. It's just good to think about your component itself. There's actually a kind of fun tool, a fun and very useful tool called Excalidraw. If you go to excalidraw.com, you can mock up things pretty quickly there. Like, if you're just kind of brainstorming on what you want to do. Okay, so we're gonna do our first story, and I have a shell here of a button component, and we're going to paste that into the editor in a minute. And we're also going to grab a snippet of what a storybook story is, and we'll start working with that. And we'll just go from there. And this is going to be the first part of the live coding. So I'm going to just stop sharing for a sec because I'm going to need to share my other screen. Okay.
I'm not sure I'll ever be brave enough to live code, like live stream coding.
You kind of get used to it.
Okay.
It's kind of, you go with the assumption that something will probably always go wrong, and then it's kind of stress-free. That's what kind of why I like streaming as well, because if you do a YouTube video, you have to edit it, it's polished. If you do a stream, it's almost expected that something is going to go wrong. So okay, let me just get a browser window in here too. Can folks see my VS Code and a browser window?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm just going to start Storybook. So this is in development mode. These commands, they get installed to your package.json when you install Storybook. I'm not installing Storybook now just because it's just to save time, but I'll explain how you do it when we get to a Collab Lab project. So you can see here on the right, I'm going to zoom in just so it's a little bigger for folks. This is the Storybook server running. By default, it's running on port 6006 on your local host. So like I said, I'm just going to grab those code snippets. So just 1 second here. Of course, I'm doing my slides and I can't copy it. All right, cool. First story. Okay. So we're gonna rework these a bit, but I'm just grabbing the code snippets. So just give me 2 seconds. Okay. Okay, now you can see here, it's got hot reloading. You see it says failed to compile. It's because it's not finding the button component because I haven't pasted it in yet. So if I save this now, okay, button stories, cannot find button.css. Should be there. I'm going to stop the server and restart it. Sometimes when you add files, it will not like it. Okay. So we'll just give that 2 seconds. It's just building again. Okay, well, what's it complaining about? Page.stories. Okay, I'm getting the error that Becca got before. Okay, 2 seconds here. I'm just going to delete these stories. Delete. So I spoke too soon about things not working, Andrew. So looks like there's some bad karma in the air this evening. Hopefully not too bad.
Hopefully I didn't jinx you.
All right, localhost. Oof, what can it find? Source button.
Is it case sensitive? Because that button is lowercase and the other, I think, is capitalized for the import.
You are correct, and thank you for the collaboration.
Get a controller in the guest room. I know that you searched.
Thanks everybody for.
Okay, what's going on here? Okay, I'm gonna just exclude the CSS file for a second. Let's see, what is it not doing? If for some reason this doesn't work, we will try this again. Button stories. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I copied the the component into the stories file. Okay, that's what it is, I believe. Yeah, I think that's it. There, button component, and yeah, that's exactly what I did. It's just a copy pasta error. So if I just save this. Okay, and we got our import button. Let's see here. It is, yeah, const. Okay, so nothing like import, export const. No, I do have the wrong thing here. It's not copying, that's why. 2 seconds. All right, save that. And this here. Okay, that looks a little better. Oh, okay. Whew. Little wipe a little sweat off my brow there. Okay. Let's just save the. Okay, so it's fine in the CSS file. Okay, cool. So you can see here, if I change this and I save this, you're going to see it says hello now. So you can see the hot reloading happening. So let's start off with, we want some props in here. So we're going to say text, and then we'll say this is text in here. And we don't have to worry about prop types right now, but we're going to come in here. Now the storybook, the way it works at the moment, am I still doing text there? That's right, save that. Okay, if I come here, there's this section called args, and this is essentially, did I call it label? Text. It allows you to kind of set props here, and I'll explain what's going on. So if we do this and say, hi, folks. Okay, now you can see, if we just kind of backtrack here, we've added a prop called text, and that's the inner text of the button that gets set. And what we're doing here is we're saying, let's pass in this object here. Think of it as your collection of props. And if you look here at this const template, you can see here for folks, if you're not familiar with this syntax, this is called destructuring of an object. And so what this does is it will expand all the key values in this object here as props. So I can say, you know, like, hi, just hi, and you're going to see it keep changing and stuff. And what we can do is let's add another story. And let's call this one secondary. And we'll just call this secondary. And say primary. And we'll just say that. And then all of a sudden, did I call them the same thing? What did I do? Text, secondary, primary. What's going on? Oh.
You have primary args, and then you redefine
Oh,
primary.
yeah. See, I'm having a bad case of the copy paste. It's not boding well for me. Okay, cool. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, cool. So you can see here, there's the different text. So that's good. Okay, so now let's come back to our button component, and let's say variant, and we'll put a class name here, and we'll just say, I'm going to use string template strings. We'll say button dash dash, and we'll say variant. And then we'll come back here. Yeah, we don't really need the prop types. Save that. Okay, now everything still looks the same. Let's come over to our CSS file. Let's go dot button dash dash, sorry, primary. And we're going to say background color blue. And let's come back here and we'll say variant. We'll say it's primary. Whoops, unexpected to, yeah, okay. What did I miss? Oh, yeah, comma. I usually have all my linting and stuff all set up, but okay, that's looking pretty ugly at the moment. Let's give it some better contrast there. Let's say white. Okay, and like maybe let's just expand on the button a bit, and I'll say padding, for example, and we'll just come back here, and then we're going to add another class, which is the button class. And then you see all of a sudden we're in Storybook, we're building out stuff, we're not worrying about the application at all. So this is kind of cool. So now we're like, well, we got a primary and a secondary button. So let's do this one. And then I don't know, let's say it's black, the color, and then we'll say it's gray. I think this one is okay for contrast. Oh, due to the CSS cascade, the second class name, which is the same name, took over. So let's call it secondary. Okay, so if we come here, primary is good, we come to secondary, and all of a sudden you see we've got different states and things are looking different. So we're slowly building out the control, and obviously this control isn't really that big, but you can kind of get the idea of kind of where we're going with this. We're just building it out. And there's other interesting things that you get out of the box with Storybook. There's this control section and this tab. Well, this is an add-on that we'll talk about after, but I can come in here and just directly start editing the text. So I can say like, I'm going to make it longer. And who knows, maybe you want to have a story at some point that sees how does the button react when you have super long text, and you could be testing it here, but then maybe you make another story after to say, I don't know, button with long text, does it wrap? What's it do? So this is just we're just kind of, starting to get a feel for how things are going. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I don't know if any folks have any questions at this point about that.
It's cool because it decouples you from having to be in your application, right? As you're tweaking things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, cool. I'm going to
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you just put in, like you changed the content and added all those words, does that talk back to your code and change your code?
What it's doing is it's not changing the component. Like you saw me edit, like I was in the button.js file, and that's me changing the component. But the other things I'm doing, like if I was typing in that controls section, it's just updating it within the context of Storybook, showing different kinds of props. You're changing values for them. So it's kind of temporary, those changes you see when I start typing in there.
It's like a preview, and then you could be like, I like that, and then code it in, kind of.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the point of it is you want to have these props that you have coming in. You want to show the props in different states. So in the stories, if we come back to there, if I share my desktop again, whoops, here.
I'm just talking like specifically when you made changes to that text that you're showing there. Like
here?
Yeah, you didn't have it like you're passing in that variant string template in your code, but now that you're changing the content, that button text content in there, does that affect what's on your JavaScript file?
It's not changing the actual file. So this is, it's really, it's temporary. Like as soon as I stop the server, that stuff won't work anymore, but it won't have affected my files. All that's happening is under the hood, it's Storybook's using Redux. And then basically when you change things, it's just sending actions to say, update these props. So it's acting kind of like a mini application, but the actual source code, like if I change this to hello, there's no source code being changed at this point. It's just me in the testing server, which is Storybook, that you're seeing it change.
Yeah, like a playground sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, playground's a good term for it too.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, I'm just gonna share my slides again. Okay. just make sure I get my, all right, cool. All right, so let me just continue here. Folks can still see my slides.
Yep, decorators.
Cool. Yeah, cool. All right, yeah, so we're gonna talk about decorators now. Now, the easiest, well, what they are essentially is they're a way to enhance a storybook story. So, for example, maybe in the storybook, like you have this kind of canvas area, maybe you want to add more padding to all the stories because all the components you're testing are like at the top left. Or maybe you want to center all the components that get rendered when you're testing them. So you can do that through a decorator. And it's honestly nothing scary. It's a decorator is essentially another React component that might takes one prop, which is the storybook story itself, and it kind of think of it like wrapping it. That's why this is not exactly what it's doing, but I drew it. I wrote it out in JSX to kind of give an idea of what's happening here. So you can kind of see like, okay, I've got my storybook story, which is your story there. So that might be the button that's rendering. And then I have this individual story decorator. Maybe that's me adding some information about all the buttons that I want to show when I'm in the storybook story for that. And then you can have them at different levels. You can have it on a per story basis. You can have it on all the stories for a particular component. And you can also have one that's global. And you can also have all three. And the global one will always be the first one, and the story decorators, and then the individual story decorators.
Can I ask, so is that about sort of passing in default props, or is that about setting like if a component might have an interaction with a parent component or something, like visually or something like that? It's more about that?
Yeah. Well, you could have a decorator as it is a parent component, but you could use a decorator, for example, like say you had, I'm trying to think of a good example of a component, but you have some kind of function. Like typically when you have a stateless component, it's receiving a prop, like it's getting its on click from a parent component that set that function, or maybe it's grabbing some external data. So you have that prop coming in. And in the case of some stories, components that you're trying to write stories for, they rely on some kind of parent component. And so what you can do is you can use a decorator as kind of like a pseudo parent of it to kind of mimic what the real parent would do. And if we go back to, just go back a few slides here, I'll just show you. So you see here the autocomplete that we have here. You're selecting a user, and then it's injecting it into this text area. That text area is a decorator that's allowing us to kind of return that value from the component so we can show how it actually works. But the actual component itself is that combo box. There's an input as well, but it's hidden. You can't see it. It's kind of on top of it, but it's just this way you're able to say like, this is the component and this is kind of how it works. Even if that's, it's faking to some degree, but it's really to showcase how the component works. So that is one reason why you might want to use a decorator. Another reason might be like, say like I said, the canvas where you have your stories, like on ours, on the forum one, if I go to here, let me open. I just have this running locally. So this is the forum storybook running locally. And I'm just going to go to the buttons here. And you see how I can switch themes here? This is a decorator that I wrote that injects the different theme CSSs because we're a Rails app, we're not using something like styled components or any kind of CSS in JS. There's no theme provider. We're relying on kind of old school, just like inject a style script. But to get that to work, I wrote a decorator that this is contained around every story that gets rendered in the forum storybook. And it allows you to just see how all these components look in different themes. So that's an example as well of a decorator. The decorator can literally be anything you want it to be, as long as it's returning JSX or like anything that a React component can return. Like you can even return null in a component, and maybe you're logging to a screen or something. There could be like, honestly, it's whatever you think you need. The other thing we do is we add extra padding. So we have if we come back to the form storybook, it's not, I think we altered it, but they used to be centered. So that's another thing you can do as well. And then it's just kind of like you've done this in one place, and it's not like you'd have to say for every story I write, I need to add this decorator to say center all my components to show them visually. So those are some ways you can actually use decorators. So why don't we make our first decorator? So I'm going to come back and we're going to do some more live coding, and hopefully I don't do more copy pasta this time. Maybe I'm just feeling the Collab Lab heat. I don't know what it is. All right. Okay, so we have our component here, and you can see here on the right, we've got those things changing. Let me just shrink this. So I go back to the primary.
Following your slideshow.
Okay, let me reshare again. Desktop 1. There we go. Do you see it now?
Yep.
And you see the mouse moving.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. All right, so we've got our stories here. Now, like I mentioned, you can have global decorators. You can have them on all the stories for a particular component, or you could do it on an individual one. So let's just start off with here. We're going to add decorators. It's a property on this global export here, the default here, and it accepts an array. And we can, it's essentially a function. So I can just say my decorator. It doesn't even need to be, it's not necessarily a component, but yeah, we'll make it a component, sure. And I can just come right up here. If you were doing this in your own storybook, it would probably be like a decorator imported from another file and stuff, but just for the sake of brevity, I'm doing it in here. So we go my decorator, and what it accepts is it accepts a story, which is a function. And we can come in here and let's just say we're going to return some JSX, and I'll just say div, and then I'm just going to do inline styling here instead, and I'll say padding, and we'll say like 5 rem. Does that look okay? What's it? Oh yeah, this has got to be quotes here. Okay, and then in here, I'm just going to say run the story, which is, it's a function, but it will render it. So now if I save this, of course it fails to compile. Oh yeah, sorry. It's an object, but I have to put it within other brackets. So now you see all of a sudden my button is out way further. So like if I change the number of rems here and save, you see it's moving around. So that's, this is a way to demonstrate how you could do something where you want to center it or maybe change the padding just so visually it looks better when people are looking at it. But it could be other things too, you know. You could say like, I don't know, we could say, let's do this, return null, because you can return null in a React component. And I could say like alert yo, save that. Okay, just except I've got to learn to type. Okay, and then what am I missing now? Story, return null. Okay, and then you see I've got an alert happening. You know, you probably wouldn't want to do that in your storybook story, but these are just some examples of how you can build these decorators out. I'm going to remove that. We'll put it back to what it has. And so if we put that back there, so now I have that, and I got to just close this and refresh. Okay, now you can see if I come to the secondary, it's like that as well. But if I come over here and let's just change this to 1, and I'm going to say on the secondary one, I'm going to add a decorator there as well. and it's always an array. This is something with their new format. And I'm going to click save. Now you're going to see, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it in line, sorry. So save that. Okay, so you see the primaries there, but now if we click on the secondary, it's probably going to be 3 rem out instead. And if I come back here, so you can see how there's like one for all the stories, but then I can also apply a decorator to a particular story. And this is kind of like something you could maybe do, Andrew, like you were saying, like if you need this parent component to manage some kind of props that get passed into the component you're building out, for example. These
I
are,
expected that to replace your other decorator, but it actually just nested it, right? Is that what happened?
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of why I was showing it kind of like in that JSX view where you have global, all the stories decorator, and then the individual one. So they kind of compound. And so it's kind of neat. Typically I would say like on the forum code base, I use them globally. So like for like that theming that I have there, and we have some spacing and stuff, but there's nothing stopping you from doing it at all these levels.
So Lenny asked in the chat, so are decorators like global styles and styled components, but with JSX?
Well, it's not even necessarily a styling thing. I showed a styling example, but you know, by just adding some padding, but it could really be like the parent component is rendering a text area like I was showing you in that autocomplete, and then I'm loading up my actual story in there, and it's interacting with the stuff that decorator's interacting, for example. So it's not always style specific. I just happen to show some that were styling. For example, like when I showed the funny one with the alert just saying, yo, there's no styling in there, but it's still a decorator. But a lot of times it is used for styling things and the theming, like I mentioned previously. So
and yeah, Meg, so the name decorator, it's not to decorate it really. It's like it's decoration in the sense of like a Python has decorators. It just sort of like something that alters the function, right?
Yeah, it's more like the decorator programming pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can how you there's like there's a book called The Gang of Four. If folks want to Google that, it's a book about programming patterns, and it'll talk about the decorator pattern. It's similar to that.
Okay. We have a couple other questions in the chat too. I don't know if you want to like just open the chat.
I've got plenty of time. I can talk forever because like I think we're only like halfway through the slides.
So yeah, one question is, could you put a story as a decorator? Could you use another story as a decorator?
I don't think so, but at that point, if you were thinking of making a story a decorator, it probably sounds more like you want to be creating some kind of React component to do something for a story. Because the stories themselves, there's like a convention to how they're written, and like if we come back to, if I go and share my screen again, the main screen, desktop one, yeah. You know, the main thing here is there's this component right here, the template. That's what the stories are all driven off of. Like we're just injecting props in it. So I don't think you would really be, you could use it, but I don't think it would make sense because the story here is it's got a JSX React component here, but I honestly can't think of how you would use it as a decorator.
I guess it would have to, sorry, I asked the question. I guess it would just have to be static. So it would end up being a decorator at the end of the day. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. No, don't be sorry. I think it sounds like, you just want to create a React component to do something. It just happens that the Storybook stories are React components too, but
yeah, like if in your actual application, a particular component always lived within another component in your application, you could use that component as a decorator to simulate that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and you can literally pull in anything, you know, like you could pull in that parent component that you need from that you're building out too. Maybe it makes sense that you need to build them both out in Storybook. I guess I'll give the horrible answer, which is always it depends, but cool. Is there any other questions, or should we keep moving on? Or
so, Karen, did your question get answered through the course of all that?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thanks.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Whoops. Okay. Yeah, so we just did that. So you can see my slides again. I'm all paranoid now since the video.
Yeah. Well, we can see slides and notes and VS Code and the browser.
Okay, yeah, I'm on the wrong one. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Let's go back to desktop too. Okay, so you should just see the slides now. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about the component story format. This is something that folks on the Storybook team created, and it's a standard for how you write Storybook stories. So we kind of talked a bit about the pieces in the story, but we haven't really broken it all down. So we're kind of going to go into that now. So the component story format, or CSF, because we need more acronyms in the tech space. It's the recommended way to write stories in Storybook. It consists of this default ES module export that we're working in there, the export default, and we have the title, we have a component, and there was the decorators that we were doing there a second ago. So those are some of the properties on there. The title is what you see in the Storybook sidebar when it gets rendered. There's interesting things you can do with the title. If you want to give it a bit of a hierarchy, so in the example here, it says Collab Lab Talk /button. What that's going to do is it's going to create a section called Collab Lab Talk, and under that, it's going to create a hierarchy, and you'll see a leaf node in there in the sidebar showing button. So you can structure things a certain way. I don't talk about it in the slides here, but you can also sort how all the Storybook sidebar gets arranged. If you want to be very specific, because by default it goes by alphabetical order, but whatever your use case is, you might say I want to have this intro section, and then I want to have a component section, and so there's a lot of flexibility there. So these are some of the main things you can do in here. And yeah, basically, aside from the title, you have the component property. And what that does is tell Storybook, this Storybook file is for all the stories for this button component. And under the hood, it uses that to do a bit of, I don't want to say magic, but if we come back here to, let me bring it over. I don't know if it's running. I think it is. Oops. So if we load this Storybook back up again, that metadata, the title and so on. So you see button primary. There's some hierarchy there, and then Collab Lab Talks up there, and then there's other information in here that it's able to infer. We talk about it a bit later, but you can see here, it's able to infer all these props here, like text and variant. It knows their strings, so it actually shows text boxes to manipulate them. So there's a bunch of information in there that you can add, but in the context of React, it is able to infer a lot of things. There's the other property that's called archetypes that we don't show in the stories that we're writing, and this goes back to what I was saying about Storybook is able to figure out what the props of the component are. How it does that is a few ways. It reads most likely the function signature, where the props are. It uses under the hood a project called React DocGen, which is another tool for generating documentation. You can also explicitly write these out, but in the context of React, we don't really need to. But I'm just mentioning it there. And there's links all at the end of the slide deck about this that you can read a little more into if you want to. There's other things that it can provide too, like I was saying, because it knows the type. If you look in the screenshot here, you can see for primary, this is a sample button that they give in the Storybook stories when you install it. it's a Boolean, it's either true or false. So you can see there's this component that's just it's a switch, a context switcher, like you can click on or off kind of. So there's some information there that you can add. There's a good example of it, like if you had a prop like background color, you could actually say in the archetypes, I want to set the component that allows me to pick one. You could change it to a color picker component. When you install Storybook, like I said, it installs those default stories, and you can see that they use a color, a background color of a prop, and then they have this color component that's just an input of type color picker. So there's a lot in there, but honestly, most of the time you're not going to have to worry about it. And then the component story format also contains named exports, and these are what our stories are. So like primary, secondary, and so on. There's things that you can have in there as well. We've already looked at the decorators, the args as well. The args are what the props are that we're passing in. And there's another property that we weren't using called story name, but you can use that. So by default, what Storybook will do is it will grab the name of that named export primary, for example, and it will use that as the title of yours in the sidebar. And if you had something like primary button, it would actually be able to call it primary space button. It's got these string utilities to kind of handle that. But if you had stuff like you want to put an umlaut on your like eye, you throw in some emojis, you can kind of spice up your Storybook name there. Sorry, your story name, not the Storybook itself.
So we're almost at the top of the hour, but I don't want to miss out on you adding this to the TCL 16 repo. That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah. No, for sure. We can jump into that. I think we dug into things a little too much to not get through all the slide decks, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, we can jump straight to that. So let me move over there. Like I said, I'll provide the whole slide deck after. But yeah, so why don't we do that? Because that will be important for you folks. So I'm going to close this one. We don't need this one. Okay, so I'm in the TCL 16 project. I'm going to just share my screen.
For people who aren't familiar with Collab Lab, so we name all of our teams TCL and then some number. So we started with TCL 1 and we're up to TCL 20. And Nick, in preparing for the talk, asked if there was a repo from one of the actual projects that a team had done that he could just add Storybook to. So we settled on TCL 16s, which is part of the cohort that just wrapped up a couple weeks ago.
Okay, cool. All right, just to speed things up a bit, I've already installed React Storybook, and I'm just going to unstash some changes I made from Git. And the TCL 16 project, if there's folks from that team here, they use Sass for the styling, and Storybook has presets to support that. There is a preset called Storybook/preset-SCSS, and I added that. There's some configuration. This is in the slide deck that we can look at, or you can check out after. But essentially, I'm just adding it to the configuration to say I want Storybook to be able to support using Sass. So I'm just going to add that in. All right, cool. And okay. Did that go in? Oh yeah, it would help if I added them. Okay, cool. All right. So now I'm going to start up Storybook. And it should pop open on the side in a second. And there's this component in this project called add item. And for those who aren't in the Collab Lab, it's a shopping cart project. So I'm going to save this. This is going to give an error, most likely. Yeah. So it's giving, oh yeah, I undid my changes, but I need to make sure that the Sass is installed. Good thing the computer's fast, so this should be fairly quick. Okay, let's go back up. This will start up again. There is going to be some other errors because this is, we're working with Storybook after the components have been made. And so there's some things that might not work right away. So, okay, we've got this add item.scss. Okay, what's going on here? Collab Lab, add item. Okay, I'm gonna just take this out for a sec. I don't think that's the issue. Okay, I guess that is the issue. We'll try and sort that out. Okay, we have this add item here. Okay, so I haven't created this component. Obviously, this is what was in the project. And if we drag this down, you can see right away, if we come back to, we wrote some stories before here. So this is Collab Lab, so I can call it Collab Lab Talk. And it's going to update. And I think there's a refresh issue with something, but you can see that it's there. Why is it not showing up? Okay, cool. Okay, so the component's there and it's rendered right away. So I'm going to close this panel. Let's just drag this down. So there's some options in here, and you can say add to the shopping list. So I can, if I say add, it's not going to work because it's going to tell me to add something here. So let's say hot sauce, and I'm going to add it, and nothing's happening. So let's take a peek here. Is there any errors or something going on? The add to shopping list is not doing anything. So let's take a peek at what that does. So if we go to, there's probably an on click in here. Add item, on change, grocery item, input change. That's the item name there. Okay, where's the add to shopping list? Okay, so we have this button and it submits. Okay, that all looks good. Okay, I see there's Firebase in here, so I'm already suspecting that Firebase is the issue because we don't have Firebase in the in Storybook. So I'm just gonna comment this out for a second. Let's see what happens here if I go test soon.
That's a good example, right? Like that kind of exposes the coupling between the database and this component. So Storybook might encourage you to write this in a way that's a little bit more just standalone or something.
Yeah, and so at this point, to be clear, the component is actually loading in Storybook. That's what we're seeing here right now. The issue is because I saw that I tested this out in the app, and it's supposed to, it says like item added, and then I have a feeling it's not working because of that coupling of the dependency on the Firebase. So I'm just trying to see, I think there's another spot where Firebase is used. One sec here. Let's close this. Let's look for db.
Kind of points out a thing that Storybook helps you with though, right? Which is that you really want this to be a tool for visual components, right? To be able to sort of manipulate, the state so that you can see the permutations in a visual way. And this does kind of help you organize your code in a bit so that, right, like your visual components remain sort of visually oriented, and then you manage your database stuff somewhere else, and then you can make them, stubbed out and talk to each other and such. Anyway.
Yeah, so there's something going on, which because you see there's this swal item added, so that's supposed to happen. So at this point, because I'm not super familiar with this code base, what I would probably do is I would come in here into the debugger, and I would just go here, and that's called add item. So I'm just going to make this bigger for a second here. I'm going to see what's going on. So you can use, if you use Visual Studio Code or pretty much any editor these days, if you do Command P, it always does that when I'm in the wrong thing. If you're in, I'm in Firefox, it does that. If I press Command P, I can type the file and I can go to it, and I'm going to load it up in here. And we know it's when I click add to shopping list. So that's the on submit handler here. So I'm going to say add to shopping list. Okay, there's validation failing. Let's click there. I'm going to say add. Okay, you see here I'm in the debugger now. And now me as somebody new to the code base, and this is something you would actually be doing probably on a real job. You'd be like, hey, it's the new guy. Okay, can you fix this bug? And like, I don't know how any of this code works. So, okay, so if we go into this existing check, and okay, so there's another DB call. Okay, so that's what the issue is. It's calling Firebase here too. So for the sake of simplicity, I think what I'll do is I'm going to remove those calls to Firebase. That was existing check. So I'm going to say false. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come back here, and I have a feeling things should work now. Okay, cool. All right. So what happened here, Andrew mentioned it, was we have this tight coupling with Firebase. It's like directly in the component, and there's ways we can mitigate that. It's a good example because, like, say you get acquired by Instacart because of your awesome shopping cart system. They're going to be like, we don't use Firebase, and then you're like, oh no, we got to rewrite everything now. If you were to pass in these database calls as function props, then you could have something that, for example, like I undid it here, but like this existing item check, that's using Firebase. But if we had something that abstracted away the Firebase part of it, just to say, like, you know, do a check as a prop, like pass this existing item check in as a prop, and then in the context of Storybook, I can actually mock that prop. Like I can just put in a prop that says, like, when it's a successful add item, I'm just going to say existing item check returns false, because I want to display the scenario where it doesn't already exist. And then another one, we might want to say it returns true. So like if I save this and we come back, I'm expecting this to show something else, and it says check again. So you can see, you can build out the Storybook like this, and this kind of ties into why, in my opinion, I think it makes sense to kind of go the Storybook way to start building out these components, because I have a feeling if they had started with this, they probably would have been like, I don't think we should pop Firebase right into the component. But because you're in the application when you're building this, it's like, you're like, oh, yeah, I have access to Firebase, no problem. So yeah, that's, I know we're running late on time here, Andrew. So I guess what I'd do is I'd kind of summarize what we've done here. I didn't do that step to install Storybook because it takes a minute or two, but essentially it's in the slide deck, but you can run a command called npx space sb for Storybook space init. And what it does is, I'll just stop sharing this because we were able to successfully show the component working. I'll come back to my desktop too, and then we can I'll kind of zoom through some of these slides here, but let me, where is it? Okay, I lost my other slide. All right.
There was one question in the chat, which was saying that you could do the same with maybe a custom hook, like the real hook would make DB calls, but you might be able to mock out the hook to simulate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, custom hook, if you wanted to use component state, for sure. Yeah, you could have a use Firebase, and I would guess that I know Firebase has a development environment too. I haven't really used Firebase myself, but yeah, you could have you could do something in that hook. You could maybe mock the hook, maybe then to, however you decide to approach it. If you can abstract away the fact that it's using Firebase, it'll make your component more resilient to change. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to show you here. So you can run this command when like if you go into your Collab Lab project, you just run npx sb init, and what this does is this CLI tool, command line interface tool, it's able to detect the type of project. So it'll know that this is a Create React app. It will set up Storybook to work with Create React app. We use Preact at Forum, and when you install it, it knows that Preact's in there, and then it configures Storybook to work with Preact. If you had a Vue project, same kind of idea. So yeah, so we're kind of over time, like you said, Andrew. So I'll just kind of recap what we've done here. We kind of did a whirlwind tour of Storybook. We had some video issues. It was good times. We were able to build out some stories, and then close to the end, we were able to have Storybook integrated into a Collab Lab project. We loaded up the add item component. We were able to get it loading up in Storybook. We saw there was some things that were tightly coupled, which was preventing the component to work how we thought it would. And then we kind of talked it through because we don't have time to actually implement it, but we kind of discussed how you could just abstract away the fact that Firebase is being used, and it made the component easier to build and also be more resilient to change. Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it. Like I said to Andrew and Rachel at the beginning of the talk, I'll make the slides available. There's a bunch that we skipped over because of time constraints, but you can still check it all out. There's a bunch of resources in here too. And I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. I know depending on where you are, it could be late, could be early. It's starting to get late where I am, but yeah, thanks to everybody for coming to the talk. I hope you learned at least one thing new maybe. And yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much. Everyone have a good night. We'll post the recording tomorrow probably. So, but thanks for coming. And thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Great
Thanks,
job.
everybody.
Yeah, and we can post the
Thank you,
slides on the meetup page as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah, I'll
you.
get that to you, Rachel.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks so much. See you later.